Hey George, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's been a good day. I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Kind of following off of Sunday's discussion and tracing our steps back a little bit. So George, let's get right into it. We were talking about the state of. Hold on one second. Let's get into it. We were talking about the state of the pulpit, and you made a statement that really, I'm still chewing on the statement. You said, if the preacher's robe is gold, then the message is dross. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's what you said. So let's unpack that for a little bit. What does that mean for you? What is kind of your thought process behind it? Talk to me about the state of the modern pulpit.
Well, that was sort of a facile statement because, in fact, it was almost like the preaching in the pulpit. It was designed to just make you think about something immediately, and I think it only has context um, in a certain segment of the preaching world. Um,
Hmm.
there are and And when I said that it doesn't apply to preachers who wear vestments, for example, because
Okay.
vestments have always been more a symbol of a parish's wealth than anything else. Um, but what I was trying to pull out was that often congregations become mesmerized by watching the preacher rather than listening to what is being said.
Hmm.
And often preaching preachers get away with saying very little because they realize their congregations are visually oriented. And
So is this a issue of modesty on the side of the preacher? Is it an issue of appetite from the pulpit? Is it a mixture of both? Just the culture
no,
of church? What?
it's a matter of theater versus church.
Hmm.
Oh, okay, it's a matter of the preacher knowing that probably he or she has very little to say or very little training in how to say it, and so glitter is what catches the attention of the audience.
Hmm.
And there was recently a case, I can't remember which city it was. It might have been New York, where a preacher was robbed of several $1 million worth of diamonds in the middle of a
Yeah,
wedding
yeah, yeah.
service. Okay. Um, well, I'm not exactly sure why you need to be wearing that amount of money to preach Jesus' message.
Hmm.
Um, assuming you even know what Jesus' messages were. Uh, I'm not, and that might sound unkind, but I sometimes think that preaching in America has lost its way, and I'm not exactly sure when that happened. I think perhaps, at least in some mainline con- denominations, preaching after the Second World War became more concerned with calling people's attention to social problems
Hmm.
rather than teaching that it was their responsibility to fix them.
Mm. So highlighting, like you said, the tension or critiquing what's going on socially without this call to action for the church to respond to the social ailments. Am I getting that right?
right. And if you don't call to social action, if you just call attention to the problem without the action element, then you miss the point.
Hmm.
Um, because what Jesus was calling his disciples to do was action, not it was an active thing. It was not a passive thing.
Yeah.
And now, and this also finds, I mean, the sort of the darker mirror image of this is what is going on in the process of creating uh, Christian nationalism,
Hmm.
which is in essence a call to action, but it's the wrong action. It has nothing to do with Jesus' teaching. It's an action designed to make the caller politically powerful. And it, I believe that that represents a an important example of uh, Jesus in his period of temptation.
Okay.
Jesus rejects the devil, and in this case, we have a whole bunch of prominent preachers who have not only accepted the devil but sort of welcomed him with open arms. Uh,
Eee! Wow, George, that is a strong statement.
yeah,
And
well,
we got preachers that are welcoming the devil.
no, they've done it. They've
They've
already
done it.
done it because they seek political power rather than anything else.
Hmm.
And so the message that they're preaching from the pulpit is extremely socially divisive because they're not
Hmm.
calling their congregations to the sort of social action Christ was concerned with. Rather, they're calling them to social action designed merely for their own, increasing their own power politically. And that
So
is,
it's not just a call to action. What you're saying is there's been an absence of a call to action that is identifiably aligned with the teachings of Christ.
right. Rather, it's a very powerful call to action for something quite different and whose aims are something that I believe Christ would have serious problems with.
So, what is there a way for someone, let's say someone who stopped by and listened to this, to course correct? Like, what are the sorts of questions as you're going in to hear a sermon or to discern the voice of God in a sermonic moment? What are the sorts of questions that should be at the forefront of your mind? Maybe should the question be, um, what is this calling me to do? Should you be that specific with what you're
Well,
listening for?
yes, you should certainly do it. You should certainly evaluate it that way. You should evaluate it from the basis of whose voice you are listening to. Is this the voice of the Holy Spirit, or is this the voice of some other spirit?
Hmm.
Um, and um, and if this is you are being asked to do something that there is no that you cannot himself, then you have to evaluate whether or not the message is a true message designed to help you in what I think it is a preacher's responsibility, and that is to cause his listeners, his congregation, to yearn to know God better,
Hmm.
and not much else really. Because once you lay that as the bottom line, the rest of what Christ asks his disciples to do falls naturally from it. So that the bottom line then becomes the willingness on the part of every Christian to daily evaluate, as you yourself have often said, the health of their soul in relation to their faith. And their faith should be rooted in that process rather than uh, in some other. Just not. I cannot imagine it, you even calling it a Christian faith if um, its intent is so contrary to Christ's teaching.
George, I mean, that is wow, that's a lot. And I think that putting your finger on the sorts of theater that um, help for us to be satisfied with very shallow messages that aren't really steeped in the message of Jesus Christ and aren't really being informed by the desire to live out the gospel that is being taught. Um, is this is something that's reoccurring, right? This is a critique that's pretty broad. Many people have made it, but what do we say to? Can the church strengthen herself to where this sort of preaching is not even socially acceptable in the context of church, where this sort of preaching is just from the pew not well received? What's that about? Because there's definitely the responsibility of the preacher in preparation, but what responsibilities do we have as listeners? What's the question on the table is really this: what's the responsibility of the pew to the pulpit as it relates to requiring more from preachers?
Well, Christians are for the most part lazy in their Christianity and in their intellectual Christianity, because that's one of the other problems we have with Christian nationalism. They aren't lazy. They've become dangerously active for all the wrong reasons.
Hmm.
Um, it- I think, and this is the great issue that has plagued all mainline seminaries, I believe. How do you educate preachers to be able to inspire their congregations to wanting a closer relationship to God? Why do people go to church? Well, I mean, there's a course in that in seminary, probably. Um, they go over hundreds of years. They go for different reasons. They used to go because the law required them to go. Then that changed, okay, and they had to want to go. And I suppose during it's kind of funny. I wonder how I would react to listening to a preacher like Cotton Mather, for example, preach a sermon, and I don't know how I would react. Okay, but I do know that it's clear that most people who come from a mainline tradition have since stopped not only going to church, but before they stopped going to church, they stopped listening. And there has
Before they stopped going to church, they stopped listening. Wow.
yeah, and it may have happened. It may have been linear, or it may not. But clearly, they were distracted by other things. All right,
Hmm.
and they weren't getting from the pulpit anything that interested them more than Sunday 60 Minutes or the baseball or football game or whatever it happened to be. Okay.
Hmm.
Uh, and I guess it's easy to just fault the preacher.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's the easy critique.
Yeah, it is. Okay. But the preacher can't be just forgiven, if that's the right word. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the messaging, the way the messaging, see, I think younger people, much younger than I am, who are more concerned about the issues of what they call spirituality, are probably in some ways better Christians than most Christians. Okay,
Hmm.
and and but I also think that if you want to grow churches, that this is a healthy soil to sow the proper seeds in, because many young people who never go to church do have some sort of a concern for their relationship with the Holy Spirit, although they don't call it that.
Okay. So talk about a little bit about that more. Explain that a little more.
Well, you see people going into meditation, you see them going into alternative religious philosophy, you see them,
Yeah, yeah.
and really, what I think they are searching for is the health of their soul.
Yes. So they're longing for God, really.
Yes,
The experience where God becomes real and present with them,
right.
and
And they're
and they're
finding
able to
it, or
connect.
they think they are finding it, in places which have nothing to do with the church.
Hmm. So that is kind of makes the conversation more complex because it's not it's really something that needs to transform, something that needs to progress or change in the whole social makeup of what the church is or what the church is imagined to be
Well,
when we
that's
say church.
yes, because the problem with with many people who are not in church is that what they imagine church to be is not what church should be. And therefore they don't even bother to open the door because
Yeah.
their own experience with it um, makes them think that it's irrelevant for addressing the issues that they're trying to find the answer to.
Hmm. Hmm. Wow. That sounds like we're going to need to go into a part two about what the church should be, right? So we'll definitely have to discuss that. But if you could just give one practical point for somebody listening when they go to their next sermonic expression, or when they encounter their next proclamation of the gospel, give them a couple of things that they should take with them from this discussion.
Well, I think that everything that the preacher says should be evaluated on the first commandment, that you should love the Lord your God with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And if it doesn't deal with that at some level, then it's not proper preaching.
Very clear. If it doesn't deal with loving the Lord your God with your heart, your mind, your soul, your strength on some level, then that's a good litmus test. This is not where, a move in a word from the Holy Spirit. That's good stuff. We want to thank all of you for listening. If we said something that inspired you, like and share. We'll be back to have more discussions with Elder George in regards to the condition and the state of the church. See y'all later.